There's a Sunday afternoon that never quite leaves you. The house is still, the phone didn't ring. And somewhere between the second cup of coffee and the evening news, you realize you've been waiting. Again. If your children don't call as much as they used to, if visits got shorter and then shorter still, if you've started making excuses for them to your friends because the real answer is too hard to say out loud, you are not alone. And you are not a bad parent, but I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me years ago. Something it took me until my 80s to finally see clearly. The distance between me and my children didn't just happen. I helped build it, slowly, without ever meaning to. By the end of this, you'll understand how that happens. And more importantly, what can still be done about it. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm 83 years old, and I spent a long time being angry at the wrong person. I was angry at my son for not coming home at Thanksgiving 3 years running. I was angry at my daughter for keeping phone calls short. I was angry at the distance, at their busy lives, at their spouses, at the world that seemed to keep pulling them further from me. I wasn't angry at myself, not yet. That took longer. I grew up in a world where family meant something different than it does now. Not better, not worse, different. In my world, you showed up, you came to Sunday dinner, you called your mother, you didn't talk about your feelings, you demonstrated your loyalty through presence. That was the contract as I understood it, and I kept that contract. I showed up for my parents, I was there. So when my own children started fading, when the calls got fewer and the visits stopped being certain, I felt something I can only describe as a betrayal. I had held up my end. Why weren't they holding up theirs? It's a reasonable question. If you're watching this, you may have asked it yourself. But here's the thing I've come to understand, and I want to say this gently because I know how much this can sting. The contract I thought we had, I never actually told them about it. I assumed they knew, the same way I had known growing up, but I had learned it by watching. By being shaped by the same household, the same era, the same unspoken rules. My children grew up in a different time, a different set of pressures, and I never sat down with them, not once, and said, "Here is what family means to me, and here is what I need from you." I expected them to feel it the way I felt it. They didn't, not automatically, and I never asked. This is the first thing I had to reckon with, invisible expectations. Expectations I held deeply, privately, that I never once said out loud. I expected calls on certain days. I expected visits on certain holidays. I expected to be consulted about decisions, about moves, about jobs, about how they raised my grandchildren. When those things didn't come, I didn't say, "I miss you, I feel left out. I need to hear from you more." I got quiet, or I got pointed. I made comments that I told myself were just observations. Must be nice to be so busy. Don't worry about me. I'll manage. I just thought you might have called. I thought those comments were harmless, honest even. What I didn't understand was the effect they had. Family therapists, the people who spend their lives studying how families break and how they heal, talk about something called an emotional transaction. Every interaction we have with someone we love either makes a small deposit or a small withdrawal from the relationship. Warmth, curiosity, laughter, genuine interest, deposits. Guilt, silence, scorekeeping, passive disappointment, withdrawals. I thought I was making deposits. I was bringing food. I was remembering birthdays. I was present. What I didn't see was that every pointed comment, every loaded silence, every moment my children felt they couldn't meet my expectations, those were withdrawals. And over years and years, the account had run low, not because they didn't love me, but because being around me had started to feel like work. That's a hard sentence to write, even now. Being around me had started to feel like work, but I believe in telling the truth here because I think you already know it, somewhere. You felt it in the slight tension when they arrive, in the way they check the clock, in how relieved they seem when they leave, and you've told yourself a story about why. They're tired, they have their own problems. The modern world doesn't value family anymore. Some of that may be true. Life is genuinely demanding. But I have learned the hard way to ask myself a different question. What is it like to be in a room with me? Not what I intend, not what I give, not the sacrifices I've made. What is it like right now today to sit across from me and spend an afternoon? Is it easy? Is there laughter? Are they able to talk about their lives without steering around certain topics? Do they leave feeling a little lighter or a little heavier? I had to be honest with myself. Painfully honest. For a long stretch of my later years, I had become someone who talked mostly about the past, about my health, about what I'd lost, and about what my children weren't doing right. I didn't mean to become that person. I had lost my sense of purpose after I retired. I had lost my wife to illness. I was grieving in ways I didn't have the language to describe. And grief, when we don't name it, has a way of turning outward, into irritability, into need, into a kind of emotional gravity that pulls and pulls at the people we love most. I want to be careful here because I don't want you to walk away from this feeling blamed. What happened to me, and what may be happening to you, is not a character flaw. Loneliness in older age is one of the most common and least talked about experiences in this country. Health researchers and public health authorities have been raising alarms about it for years. It touches millions of people. It is not weakness. It is not failure. But loneliness, when it goes unnamed and unsupported, changes us. It makes us smaller in spirit, even when we're trying hard to hold on. And the very people we most need, our children, our family, often feel the weight of that and pull back, not because they've stopped loving us, but because they don't know how to help. Because they feel helpless, because our pain makes them feel guilty, and guilt in most people does not inspire closeness. It inspires distance. So let me tell you what I've learned, not as advice. Just as the things I wish I had known 20 years ago. The first thing I learned, ask, don't expect. When I needed more contact from my children, I never asked for it plainly. Not once. I expected them to sense it, to arrive at it themselves. And when they didn't, I felt unseen. But my children are not mind readers. They were living their lives, managing their own exhaustion, and assuming that if I truly needed something, I would say so. The day I called my son and said plainly, simply, I miss you. I'd love to talk more. What would work for you? Something shifted, not everything, not overnight, but something. He said he hadn't known it mattered so much. He'd thought I was self-sufficient. He'd thought I was fine. I had worked so hard to seem fine that I had hidden the very thing I needed him to know. The second thing I learned, let them be who they are now. My children are in their 50s. They are not the children I raised. They are full adults with their own views and their own ways and their own lives that are complete without me at the center. For years, I think I related to them as though they were still young, as though my role was still to correct, to guide, to weigh in. They had outgrown that role, but I hadn't noticed. When I started asking them about their lives, genuinely asking, and then listening without steering the conversation back to myself or to my opinions, something changed in how they spoke to me. They opened up, not all at once, slowly, because for perhaps the first time in a long time, they felt like I was curious about them, not just looking for an audience for my own reflections. The third thing I learned, repair is possible, but it takes patience. If there is real distance between you and your children, closing it is not a matter of one conversation. It is a matter of many small moments, consistent ones. A pattern of warmth over time replaces a pattern of tension. This is not fast, it is not neat, and there will be setbacks. But many people who reach out with genuine humility, not guilt-laden apology, not dramatic gesture, but quiet, sustained warmth, find that something in the relationship begins to soften. Not always. Not in every case. Some estrangements run deeper, and I won't pretend otherwise. But more often than people expect, the other person was also waiting, also hoping, also carrying something they didn't know how to put down. The fourth thing I learned, I had to build a life that didn't depend only on them. This one is perhaps the hardest. Because when you love your children, and the years are getting shorter, and the house gets quieter, the pull toward them feels like the most natural thing in the world. But a parent whose entire emotional world rests on their children's visits creates a weight that is very hard for adult children to carry gracefully. They feel responsible for your happiness in a way that isn't fair to them, and that responsibility can make every visit feel like a test they might fail. When I started building other connections, slowly, imperfectly, something changed in how my children related to me. I wasn't as hungry. I wasn't waiting. I had my own threads of life I was pulling. And they seemed to relax. They could visit me as a joy, not as an obligation. That is a different experience entirely. Building those connections doesn't mean finding a perfect new social life overnight. That isn't realistic, and anyone who tells you it's simple hasn't been 83 and lost half the people they once knew. It might be one consistent phone call a week with an old friend. It might be a class at the library, a volunteer morning. It might just be learning to sit with yourself a little more comfortably. Any of it counts. The fifth thing, and the one that took me longest to accept. Sometimes the distance is not mostly about me. My children have lives that I do not fully see, pressures I do not fully understand, marriages with their own dynamics, financial worries they don't share, health things they keep quiet so I won't worry. For years, I interpreted their absence as a statement about me. But sometimes, often maybe, it was just life pulling them sideways. And when I stopped making their absence about my worth as a father, I stopped receiving every unanswered call as a wound. That didn't make me miss them less, but it made the missing less corrosive. I'm not going to tell you this is easy. None of it is easy. If you have been estranged from a child for a long time, the grief of that is real and it is serious. If the relationship is complicated by things that went wrong years ago, things that were said or done or left unresolved, this is not a 5-minute fix, but I believe in starting. Not with a dramatic gesture, not with a long accounting of grievances and apologies, just with something small, a note, a message that asks nothing in return. I've been thinking about you. I hope you're well. Not to manipulate, not to extract a response, just to reach out across the distance and remind them that you are here, that you are still their parent, and that the door on your side is open. I spent too many years at 80 waiting to be reached for, waiting to be the one who was sought out, the way I had sought out my own parents. That waiting cost me years I won't get back, but I still have time. And here's what I know to be true in my bones, after a long life spent getting some of this deeply wrong. It is never too late to become easier to love, not perfect, not without history. Just a little warmer, a little less defended, a little more honestly present. That is enough to change something. Sometimes it's enough to change everything. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in any part of it, in the waiting, in the pointed comments, in the grief you never quite named, I want you to know something. You are not past it. This year is not too late. You have time to make one call that matters, to send one note, to sit with one question. What is it like to be in a room with me right now? And then to do something small and genuine about the answer. That's all, just that. If this reached you today, if some part of this landed somewhere real, I'd be glad to know. Leave a comment. Tell me what you're carrying. Tell me what you've learned. We're all figuring this out together, and there's no shame in being in the middle of it. If this channel is a place that feels honest to you, consider subscribing. We put something new here every week, something made for people who have lived long enough to want the real conversation. Thank you for spending this time with me.